All right, we're formally into the session that is our first of our 4 keynotes. And this one is called Head to Toe. And I think you understand what the structure is, but it's all about signature shoes and the business behind it. It's become a defining element of superstar athletes' brand equity, from the iconic Nike Air Jordan 1 OG High to Reebok's Shaqnosis and beyond. I think the 2 panelists will have something to say about both of those. Off-the-court endorsement deals are more popular than ever, thanks to creative, stylish, and innovative technology and engineering of apparel brands that are attracting male and female athletes on a global scale. The 2 panelists are seminal and defining. You already heard and know about David. But Todd Krinsky is the CEO of Reebok. He's been appointed in September 22 after more than 30 years with the company. He started either as an intern or the mailroom, which he tells me is not simultaneous, but that's the way it was. And he held various leadership roles, including Senior Vice President of Reebok Design Group, significant role in the creation and success of Reebok's partnership with athletes and celebrities, Allen Iverson, Jay-Z, now the Authentic Company entity, which he'll tell you about. But he also was part of the executive education program at Harvard Business School. It contributed to the strategic growth and leadership of his. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
We have a lot to talk about, but let's start with this.
Taught me the evolution of business, how to utilize my likeness, my personality, my basketball talent, and channel that into the business aspect of Michael Jordan as a person.
Everyone who's been represented by David turns out winning. He really takes good care of his people. And we've become great friends. And, my life has gotten a lot better as a result of my association with David.
I think the only person I've ever met who's more competitive than David Falk is Michael Jordan. I think what's made him successful is his tenacity. He never stops.
Jordan. The business relationship that would come to define David Falk began in 1984 when he became Michael Jordan's agent.
He saw something that no one's ever been able to do, and he basically, with a blank sheet of paper, created his own perception of what he felt like he can, develop in terms of an athlete who had great personality, who come from a great family background, who had great potential from a basketball sense, and a bunch of companies looking for that type of marriage. And he carved out that, that whole persona, that whole Michael Jordan perception with corporations that everybody to this day has been trying to emulate.
I told the companies, sort of like the famous John Kennedy line, ask not what America could do for you, but what you could do for America. I said, I know what Michael could do for your company. I want to know what you prepared to do if we sign with you for Michael. And Nike got it. I said, if you are interested in signing Michael Jordan, you've got to give him his own line. You got to treat him like a tennis player. I want his own line of shoes and clothing.
The whole premise of having your own shoe, no one knew where that would go, and if David knew that, then he understood the crystal ball. I think he had a vision without a doubt in terms of the first athlete being able to have their own signature shoe coming out of college. I think that was a great vision, but in terms of where that would lead us, there's no way, I could sit here today and say that 30 years ago, we would be a $1 billion brand.
incredible history. It's about the best thing you could possibly encapsulate as far as David Falk's Michael Jordan career. But as we know, there's so much more. Before we start specifically back and forth, tell one good story about Michael Jordan.
I got a million of them.
The best.
We'll come to that. Let's come back to that. I got to think of the best one.
Okay, good. There was there are so many of them. So Todd, when you kind of started in the industry,
I got you.
okay, got it? Okay, sorry. You don't listen to me anyway. Go.
So, some of you may know, I produced a movie for Michael called Space Jam in 1996. And Michael had hundreds of offers to do movies. And I turned them all down. And one day he came to me and said, I want to ask you a question, like, why have you turned down all these movie opportunities? Now, Michael loves to tweak you nonstop. He makes you better at what you do. It's affectionate, it's good-natured, but constantly like tweaking you. But he doesn't really like when you do it back. So I said, why we turn down the movie offers? Are you freaking kidding me? Because you can't act. There's only one role that you can play. And he said, what's that? The first Black James Bond? I said, no, the first Michael Jordan. So hence we did Space Jam where he played himself, stood 7 weeks in front of a green screen like you do the weather. And the movie was a tremendous success. But when they came back to him and asked him to do a sequel, they offered him $10 million for 3 days of filming. No mas. That was it.
So he won't rival some of the best directors and casting directors in the world to try to make somebody different than they are. That's a very truthful guy, and we'll talk about representation, how important that is. Todd, we were just going to start about your kind of history in the business. You've been with the company for 30 years, so you know the inside and out, not only of Reebok, but the industry as well, and how it's bred into authenticity. Working with other folks in the industry, tell me about your relationship with David and how that started and where that went.
Yeah, I mean, this is really a full circle moment for me today, and one of the reasons I'm so happy to be here. And so, I did actually start in the mailroom, and I worked in the mailroom at Reebok for almost a year and a half, just hustling to try to get a job. But Reebok was very entrepreneurial back then, and the founder of Reebok, Paul Farman, would listen to anybody who had a good idea. And there was this kid at Georgetown who was just killing it, and we started to internally campaign to sign Allen Iverson. And I just gotten a job out of the mailroom, and I was in the boardroom, and I was screaming, we should sign Allen Iverson, sign Allen Iverson. And we ended up actually signing him, and David was Allen's agent. And so then in 1996, I had a chance to go down to DC, a very surreal moment for me. I mean, I worked with a lot of great athletes and celebrities now, but back then I had never really worked with any of them. And so the first thing was just actually going down to DC and sitting in David Falk's office was surreal in itself, Michael Jordan's agent, but I had to keep stoic. I mean, we're still negotiating, and I can't be asking the agent for the autograph when we're negotiating a deal. That wouldn't have gone over well. And so meeting David was great. And then about an hour later, because he's always late, Allen Iverson rolls in, and he had this amazing aura about him when he walked in. It's like there's only 2 athletes I've ever worked with that had yet to be pros that I met. And when I met them and just looked at them, I said, they're ready for everything, coming to them. And it was Allen Iverson and when we pitched LeBron James. But the thing I remember about David the most wasn't just, because we did have a prototype that day of a shoe to show Allen, which is one of the reasons I think we got the deal. But David started grilling us with all these questions. And the reason I bring it up is because it's the fabric of the way that I think today when I try to structure a deal. David says, not about the shoe, not about how many appearances we're going to do. He's saying, what is the lane we're going to choose for Allen? How are we going to talk about him? How are we going to promote him? What's the story going to be? It was all about this storytelling, and that is so big today, but wasn't as big back then. And it put me on my heels for the first time because I thought I was going there to show a shoe and to finish a deal. But I think I learned a lot from David about the art of storytelling and how important it is that when an athlete and a brand get together, there's gold in what you're doing together. And I think that's what David taught me back in 96, and I still try to practice today. And that was the beginning of working with David.
You work with the Todd Krinskys of all of the companies. What was so special about Todd? Did he get it earlier than most people?
Well, I loved his passion. I think this is a business that's not about numbers. It's about concepts and passion. And you have to understand, 1996, there still weren't very many players in the NBA that had their own shoe. Now, to paint the picture, understand that Allen Iverson came from Virginia, was the state player of the year in both basketball and football. And throughout his high school career, he wore Nikes. Comes to Georgetown for 2 years, played for John Thompson, who is the second senior most person on the Nike board of directors. And Georgetown wore Nike. They had the Kunta Kinte cloth and the uniforms. And we went to Nike with Coach Thompson, and they were pretty arrogant by that time. They had Jordan, they had a bunch of guys, Penny Hardaway, and they made us an offer that I thought was, inappropriate in the market. And so when I met Todd, I basically said to him, you have an amazing opportunity to have a breakthrough, to take a guy that grown up with Nike. And in my opinion, and a lot of people will not agree with this, you asked me over the last 30 or 40 years, how many players in the NBA really sell shoes, not simply endorse a brand? I would say two, Michael Jordan and Allen Iverson. And Allen was such a unique personality. He was the first crossover guy with hip hop, the way he looked. He was an incredible athlete. And I think Todd got it. And he understood the opportunity, understood the window of opportunity. And Reebok did an amazing job, I think, executing who Allen was.
Yeah, and it's a teaching moment too, because you also mentioned off camera that you kind of insisted, and I'm sure you do that today, or did, that every company have some kind of a promotional commitment in the deals to make sure they tell the story.
One of the interesting things in sports is that people measure everything by sheer dollars. Like, the most important thing in making an autographed signature shoe work is the creativity of the company, the support they put behind it. You just can't put the shoe on the shelf and hope that people come buy it, especially at the beginning. You have to establish, a demand for the shoe. And I think that right away, there was just a natural connection between what Reebok was doing and what Allen's doing. I think a lot of the shoes today, you could slap someone's name out, they're all the same, and I think very few of the players today are really big enough to carry their own brands. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that, back then, we were creating moments. Like, it wasn't just selling a shoe. These were pop culture moments that we were creating, whether it was Allen Iverson with Jadakiss, that some of you remember, or Barkley talking about being a role model that Rick mentioned when we were talking earlier, or all the great Michael Jordan moments, the Penny Hardaway doll. Like, these were just great, great moments. And it was never just about launching a shoe. It was creating these experiences for the consumer and telling great stories. And I think, I sound a little old now. I mean, I do like in kind of the sneaker business, a little the music business. And I think through social media, it's gotten a little oversaturated. There's just so many sneakers. I mean, I can't even keep up. Every player has a sneaker now. Every month there's 3 or 4 launches. And back in the day, it was a little more special. A launch was an epic moment with the TV ad and a big time athlete and a great shoe. And you have to adapt to the new days. But I think David's right. Like, I think there's probably a saturation of kind of athletes that have shoes today. And I think it's going to start to play itself out a little bit more. And I think it's going to start to move to kind of the real special ones getting product as we move forward.
Comments. The thing I think is a lot of people overlook, you look from the outside at this business and you see these high-profile athletes and these allegedly high-profile agents. And what it really requires to make this thing work is a partnership. You have to be on the same page. So going in, the money will follow if the concept works. And so, people think that you're constantly at odds, you're pushing the company, you're demanding things. You got to do all that up front. And then once the deal's done, you're partners. And if Reebok doesn't do a great job as your partner, you're not going to make a lot of money in royalties. And that's really what you're achieving. I mean, we talked about this, over breakfast. In my opinion, if a player who's on the fringe, who's not a unique player, a Shaq or a LeBron or a Jordan or an Iverson, you could literally go to the guy and say, I'll make you a shoe and I'll pay you, $10,000 a year and I'll give you a royalty. And if you're really great at selling shoes, you're going to make a ton of money. And if you're not going to make a ton of money. And the idea that you have to pay some of these guys, Michael wasn't the highest paid guarantee at Nike. He was when he was a rookie by a mile. He signed for 5 times more than anyone had ever gotten in the league. But after a while, it became irrelevant. They signed players for more guaranteed money than Jordan made. And I thought that was really silly. Once you have the best, the rest of them, you need to produce. And if you don't produce, then you're probably not worth the time and the design and the promotions that it takes to make a program work.
I think the one other thing I would say, because I have a team that's working with me now that does the deals, and they come to me and they're younger. And the secret of a great deal is that before the deal gets signed, before the contract's done, you're looking across to that athlete or that celebrity and having a real conversation about what each partner is trying to get out of the deal. And I'll tell you that 9 times out of 10, it's better to go with somebody that may not be as good or may not be as big a celebrity, but it's buying into what you're doing as a brand and you're buying into their values and what they're trying to do. Those deals are going to be 10 times better than going after the superstar celebrity that really doesn't care about the brand, is just looking for a check. And today's consumer is so much more savvy than when I was doing it before, that they see through that. And you can see which athletes really rep the brands they're with and which athletes really live the brands they're with and which ones are looking for a check. And even though some of those athletes are better, their product doesn't sell as well because the consumer's not buying into the relationship. And I think that's a lot of the magic of what this industry is about. To David's point, it's not just about the promotion. It's about both parties really buying into each other.
And by the way, a teaching moment, because this is a great conversation relative to Reebok and Jordan and Iverson and shoes, but it's more important about deal making. When partners are entering into a business conversation and people hear this trite win-win-win, but they reached a point in deals where you trust each other and you have a common vision and you're both committed to putting that common vision in action, right?
Yeah. I mean,
So if I go off topic just for 30 seconds. So a great analogy to what Rick just said. So since 1982, a long time, the NBA has had a salary cap. And the players, for the most part, have shared the revenues with the league roughly 50-50. Now, if Todd and I are partners in a business in 50-50, the most important thing we can do together is figure out how to grow the business. It's not how to see if you can go from 50 to 51, or that's irrelevant in the big picture of things. And one of my frustrations with the players union for the last 40 years is that everyone comes in campaigning to run the union. I'm going to kick David Stern's ass. I'm going to kick. No, I never wanted to kick Todd Krinsky's ass. First of all, he's way too young. I'll kick my ass. But, we're partners. And when you're partners in a business, you have an alignment of interests. And you have to figure out, if Alan doesn't show up for an appearance or he doesn't want to go to China to sell shoes, it costs him a lot of money. And if you're his manager, and I was his manager only for the first 2 years, because we were a little too disciplined. You have to let your client know that if you want to make your brand with your name on it successful, there's certain obligations that you have. And that's why I don't believe it makes sense when you have these kinds of signature things to pay these guys enormous guarantees because they have to perform.
Yeah. Are most people in the industry in both your positions? Are most people in the industry as rational as the two of you are? I mean, it's a great conversation, but it's a $2 trillion industry, and you are above the fray because you deserve it. You are above the fray because you have a lot of leverage. But guys who sell themselves as agents because they can check the box, not only kicking the retailer's ass, but getting a large shoe contract where they don't end up getting it. Does that poison the industry for guys who can do it right? Does that make your job harder? Difficult question, but
I think there are a lot of, challenging personalities in the sports world for sure, in the music world. And I think, you have to really make sure that the representation is really speaking on behalf of the athlete. I'll tell you, it sounds very logical, but I'll tell you half of the time that I'm negotiating a deal, once the deal is done and I spend more time with that artist or that athlete, I learn what they really knew or didn't know through the process. David never had this problem. I can tell you firsthand when we were dealing with Alan, like everything, the athlete and management were in sync. But I think it happens a lot today because being an agent is a very fickle business. You can have the guy one day and not have him the next day. And so you're always just trying to prove that you can get the deal, get the deal, get the deal. And sometimes it's at, a loss for the kind of artist. So you got, when you're in the business for a long time, I think you can sift through who's legit and who's not. I think you can kind of sift out the good deal from the bad deal, but it's an industry with a lot of landmines for sure.
David, if you could wave a magic wand, and this is part of the answer, and make everybody behave like you, it'll be easy to do.
Well, I mean, for me, I was very young when I started representing these superstar players. I was like in my 20s when I had Phil Ford, who was the National Player of the Year. I was 31 when I represented James Worthy. And the pressure to perform internally, not from them, for myself, to feel you're representing the greatest players in the world, and you don't have years of experience like I have now. And more than anything else, I didn't want to do it the same way every time. I mean, that's the problem with the agent business today, is there's so many regulations that there are very few things that people could do. Now, if you think about this, okay, Jordan came out in '84, LeBron came out in 2003. Pretty big time difference. So Michael signed with Nike, Coca-Cola, McDonald's. LeBron signed with Nike, McDonald's, Coca-Cola. I love LeBron's marketing agent, Maverick Carter. I think he's really smart. And the stuff that he's done is not endorsements. It's entrepreneurial stuff behind the scenes, like his movie company and owning a piece of Carbondale bikes and the deal with the John Henry. I think that's really smart. And because Maverick is a very confident guy, you don't hear a lot about him. LeBron's basketball agent, Rich Paul, gets way more publicity than Maverick. And I think Maverick has really done. And so the point I want to make is that you want to treat each player as an individual. If you're going to create an individual product in shoes and clothing, it's got to be based on the athlete's personality. I mean, if you look at women's sports today, and you look at the two great rookies in the WNBA, their personalities could not be more divergent. You got a woman from Baltimore who's really edgy, and and you got a girl from Iowa who's clean cut, Midwestern, and it's going to be a great rivalry. It's going to be like Magic and Bird in many ways. I think those two women will elevate the WNBA. Now they both have signature shoes. One's with you, right?
Angels with us, yep.
Yeah, Angel Reese. And so, but when I went into Nike in 1985, 1 year after we did the Jordan deal, it had enormous success. We tried to sign Patrick Ewing. And the guy who did the deal, unlike that fake movie, Air, was a guy named Rob Strasser. I never discussed a shoe deal with Sonny Vaccaro in my life. And Strasser says to me, let me guess, Air Ewing. And I won't repeat exactly what I responded to him because we're on tape, but I said, Michael is the Air Force and Patrick is the infantry. Michael plays with grace and style and Patrick plays with, force. So we're going to call his shoe the Force. But we never signed with Nike. And Nike created a whole line of people like Patrick Ewing, the Barkleys, the David Robinsons, the infantry in the trenches sweating, called the Force. And so the challenge is to, the thing that I hated the most is that after Michael's great success early on, for the next 10 years, it was like people trying to find the fountain of youth. Everyone was looking for the next Jordan. So there was a guy named Harold Miner, came out of USC. His nickname was Baby Jordan. He came out like in '93. There was Penny Hardaway, Ron Harper. Now they're saying that Anthony Edwards. And to me, there should never be another Michael Jordan. There should be the first, whomever. And that person's got to be in it. Now he can aspire like Kobe did to have some of the characteristics and the work ethic. But everyone should be different. And if they're not different, then they're not going to sell.
I do Rick want to say on LeBron, I think, he's one of the ones that got away. We had an amazing pitch for LeBron, and a couple years after we signed AI, And it's still heart-wrenching to this day. We had this amazing day with him, and we thought we had him that day. And some of you may have seen some of the videos that LeBron and Mav have shared about the fact that we gave him a live $10 million check to cash the next morning if he signed with us on the spot. It was anyway, he still had some obligations to Adidas and couldn't sign with us. But the interesting thing about LeBron is after we didn't get him, the summer league that's here in Vegas used to be in Boston. And I was down in the court for the first night, and he comes up behind, bear hugs me from behind, and he says, "Hey man, I just want to let you know that, you guys get amazing pitch, but it's business." And I just felt like Nike was where I needed to be. And I'm thinking, this kid's like 18. Like, he doesn't owe me anything. And that was the start of me just watching him. He had a good head on his shoulders from day one. And I think the other reason why LeBron and the team do so well is because I think they do something we talked about earlier. They really decide what they want LeBron to be and who he is, and they allow brands to participate and amplify that. That's a key thing versus like Nike does this with the athlete, and then Sprite does this. When you see LeBron, it's his authentic self, but it's also what he's telling these partners he wants him to be publicly. And then the power of all the brands amplifying that together, I think, is what makes it so special versus kind of being fragmented.
It's an incredible segue. Did you want to comment?
I was going to say, so I'm a huge Shaq fan. I mean, first of all, the guy's in 90% of every commercial you see on TV, and he's endearing. He's like a big baby. I love the guy. But when Shaq was a rookie, Reebok did his first commercials, and they basically market him as what he is. He's like the Terminator. He's ripping down the backboards. And when you see Shaq play, just the sheer power and the force and size. His second commercial was with Pepsi, and Pepsi reprised a famous commercial from Coke, featuring a football player for the Pittsburgh Steelers named Me Joe Green, where he was like ferocious on the field, and he walks off the field, and he's a young kid waiting for him, and he hands him his jersey. Now, either of those roles could have fit Shaq well, but not at the same time. You can't be the Terminator and the gentle giant. You're either gentle or you're ferocious. And so I think when you're marketing a player as a company, as an agent, you've got to have a consistency. We try to market Michael. We never try to create, people say you created a role for Michael. I didn't create anything. I projected it. I understood what he was. He was the boy next door. He came from a 2-parent family. He went to college for 3 years. He went back and got his degree the year after he was drafted. He was a very normal guy off the court. On the court, he was incredible. And in all his commercials, he was just a very nice, sincere guy. Just the same thing on the video. He's just a very smart guy. And whatever role you analyze your client to have, you've got to project it across the platform with consistency.
I'm forcefully on the clock, but I just wanted to ask both of you to give me a minute for something that ought to take 20. Krinsky first. Where is the business in the next 5 years, and what's the advice to these people?
I think the business overall is thriving in our industry. I think something's happening now that I think hasn't happened in a really long time, which I think is good for the consumer and good for the market. And it's maybe that kind of other brands are starting to emerge that maybe didn't have a shot before. So if you look what's happening in our industry, Nike is still the dominant player, but I'm sure you all see that they may not be as dominant as they were before. And I think you've got brands like Hoka and On coming in. You see more New Balance than you've seen before. We're starting to grow faster now. And I think it's a great time just for the marketplace to allow for more brands to participate, more new products to be launched, athletes to have different opportunities. So I think that's one thing that's happening. I think the other thing that's happening right now is that athletes and this next generation of young people, I think they do view themselves as being brands. They view themselves as being more than just players on and off the court. And I think brands are going to be challenged to how to work with athletes in the future. So in the beginning, when David and I were doing it, it was kind of an endorsement deal. Then it grew to kind of an endorsement with royalties. You can make more money as you sell more shoes. And I think now it's evolving to something else for the next 5-10 years, which is going to be, how do you partner with these young athletes that really feel that they don't just want to be an endorser anymore. I think those days are kind of really starting to slow. And I think you got to figure out, and it's on us, it's on all of us. We're really trying to do some unique stuff with Angel Reese right now as our first player into basketball, as we start to challenge ourselves to how do we create authentic new stories for the next generation. So I think the business is going to grow. I think it's going to grow with more brands. And I think the challenge for all of us is how do you engage the next generation of athletes?
Professor, mentor, friend, as usual, last word.
So I think that the pandemic had an incredible effect on how we dress. I can speak for myself. I love clothes. I have a closet full of suits and sport coats. And for the last 3 or 4 years, I wear Lululemon, Jordan, casual. If I came to a conference 5 years ago, the idea of wearing athletic shoes would never have entered my mind. But the pandemic has changed the styles. And I think as Todd was saying, it's going to take brands like Lululemon that were really small. They're exploding. All these lifestyle brands are going to challenge the Nikes and the Adidas, the Goliaths of the business. And I think it's healthy because, way back in the Jordan, Ewing era, even Allen, if you were representing a player, you could go to Adidas, Nike, Avia, Converse, Reebok. There were British Knights. There were Spot Built. There were like tons of brands.
You're going back, British Knights.
Yeah. And today, if you've got a great player, you really have a choice of 2 companies, Nike or Adidas. If they don't like you, then you're in China with some of these other companies. So I think that the growth of new brands because of the enhanced attention to casual and lifestyle brands is a very, very positive thing, both for the athletes. The last thing I want to touch on, because Todd said a word that's like a hot button in my vocabulary, brands. To me, a brand is something that is universally acknowledged. You see whatever they call that thing for Coca-Cola on the can, the little swiggle, and it's Coca-Cola. You see the swoosh, it's Nike. You see the Jumpman, everyone knows it's Jordan. Some of these players will never be brands. They want to be brands, and I'd like to grow hair, but it ain't going to happen. And I think you got to understand who you are, and someone's got to say to you, you could be a great endorser, but to be a great brand, there probably aren't 10 sports brands, athlete brands in the last 50 years. I'd say Muhammad Ali is a brand, Arnold Palmer's a brand, Michael Jordan's a brand. Just use the word brand. People use it very, very casually. And what happens is that some of the athletes get paid more money in guarantees from a shoe company than the total number of shoes they're going to sell in a year. And so it's a folly to think that those guys can carry a brand. And if you're the athlete, you don't want to be embarrassed where you can't even cover the guarantees. So I think there's got to be more discrimination by both the agents and the companies. And you just have to be more honest with your clients and tell them you're not a starter, you're a backup. You're a great endorser, you're not a brand. But I think with more companies coming into the marketplace, my guess is exactly the opposite will happen. And people who can't carry a brand will get signed by companies that are looking for a breakthrough. Reebok was the perfect company for Allen because they were incredibly established as a brand. They were doing really, really well, but they weren't that strong in basketball. So he sort of put them over the top. But for an athlete to start with a new company and be able to establish them is a challenge.
Classic entrepreneur, great guy, historic, amazing hairstylist, all those really, 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 really good things.
My hairstyle is very consistent.
Let me say one thing. As you all can see, this part of the industry and the industry in general is in great hands because of these 2 guys on the stage. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.